The story will be told from the perspective of the main female character. My relatives didn't show up for my biggest day. It wasn't about a birthday or getting a better job. It was my wedding day. There were 4 chairs in the very first row that stayed empty. Those seats were meant for them, and the absence felt louder than the crowd of people who actually attended. I kept checking my phone again and again, almost every few minutes. I was waiting for even the smallest sign, a message, a call, anything that could explain why they weren't there. I told myself there must be some kind of emergency or delay, but nothing ever came. My phone stayed silent the entire evening. Then 1 week later, news broke that my hotel company was worth $120 million. Suddenly, my phone went off. It was my father. He wrote, "Family dinner at 7:00 p.m. Important discussion. That was the second I finally understood. They didn't want to be there for my happy times. They only wanted to take something from me. So I went there with the one thing they didn't expect to see. My name is Irma. For most of my life, I believed loyalty could turn my family into a place that felt like home. I believed that if I supported them, listened to them, and stayed patient, things would eventually feel warm and real. I tried very hard to hold on to that idea. Even when there were many moments that proved the opposite. When I was younger, our house in Denver looked ordinary from the outside. It wasn't fancy or impressive. The porch swing leaned slightly to one side like it had given up trying to stay straight. The driveway had thin cracks that grew wider every year. On summer afternoons, you could smell the lavender soap my mother used drifting through the open windows. From the street, it looked like a peaceful home where a family might laugh over dinner. But inside that house, the atmosphere was very different. Everything revolved around my father's idea of authority and control. He owned several aging motels around the city, and he spoke about them with a kind of pride that bordered on obsession. To him, those old buildings weren't just businesses, they were symbols of power. Sometimes he talked about them the way other fathers talked about their children. I used to think that meant he loved them. Later in life, I realized something painful. He didn't love them in a human way. He simply loved the feeling of ownership. What mattered to him wasn't connection, it was control. Our entire family seemed to move around him like small planets around a sun. His opinions shaped every decision. His approval decided whether something was good or bad. My mother played a very different role, but she was just as powerful in her own way. She rarely shouted or argued openly. Instead, she relied on guilt to shape our behavior. If my father wanted something, she made sure we gave it to him. She would lower her voice and say, "Your father is under a lot of stress." Or she would tell me quietly, "Please don't make things harder for him. You should be grateful for everything he does." At first, those words sounded caring, but after hearing them for years, they started to feel like invisible chains. Eventually, you stop asking questions. You stop wondering why gratitude means staying silent while someone else makes all the rules. My older brother grew up to be almost a mirror of my father. He believed the only things that truly mattered were land, concrete, and property lines. When I first told the family I wanted to build a modern hotel brand instead of buying land like they did, he laughed. He said hotels built on branding and experience were too risky. He insisted it was just a passing trend. According to him, real wealth came from owning physical ground, not creating something new. I still remember the day he said that. He was standing outside one of my father's old motels. The electric sign above the entrance flickered and buzzed like an insect struggling to stay alive. The paint on the walls was fading, and half the parking lot lights didn't work, yet he spoke about it like it was a palace. Then there was my younger brother. Life seemed to move around him without ever asking him to try very hard. He liked to describe himself as an influencer, even though he could never hold a job longer than a few days. Despite that, he always had opinions about my company. He told me how I should run things, what marketing strategy I should use, and how much money I should spend. Strangely, most of his ideas involved me paying for some problem the family had created. That was probably the reason I started dressing very simply whenever I visited them. I wore plain sweaters and comfortable pants. I avoided anything expensive or flashy. The only jewelry I kept on was a small ring my husband had given me while we were still dating. I didn't want my success to start arguments. I didn't want them accusing me of being arrogant. And most of all, I didn't want them asking me to cover their bills. Looking back now, I can see what I was really doing. I was shrinking myself so their pride wouldn't feel threatened. They never knew how difficult those first years were for me. There were nights when I slept in my car because I couldn't afford a room while traveling for work. I taught myself every part of the hotel industry from scratch. I learned how to repair broken pipes in bathrooms. I sat through endless meetings with builders and contractors, negotiating prices I barely understood at the time. Every step forward felt fragile. I was always afraid the entire project would collapse before it even truly began. My father never showed interest in that struggle. Whenever I spoke about my plans, he would simply shake his head and say, "Your business model isn't safe." He believed it was too modern and too focused on technology. In his opinion, a proper business required land and buildings you could touch with your hands. But the moment that truly changed everything for me was my wedding day. I didn't ask my family for support in business. I didn't ask for money or approval. I asked for just one thing: their presence. For one day, I wanted them to show up as my family, not as critics or people waiting to benefit from me. When those 4 chairs remained empty during the ceremony, something inside me quietly shifted. It wasn't dramatic. I didn't cry or shout. Instead, a calm understanding settled over me. I wasn't broken by their absence. I was simply finished expecting anything different from them. Still, a small part of my heart held on to hope. I wanted them to surprise me. I wanted them to prove that I had misjudged them all these years. So when my father sent that message after the news about the $120 million valuation, I stared at my phone for a long time. Family dinner. Important discussion. Maybe this was the moment they wanted to repair things. Maybe they had finally realized they had missed something important. But the second I stepped into that club, I understood the real reason they suddenly remembered I existed. The morning the news about the value came out, I was sitting in my office overlooking downtown Denver. Spread across my desk were blueprints for our next property. Sunlight poured through the large windows and reflected off the silver frame holding my wedding photo. In that picture, my husband was holding my hand gently, steadying me during the ceremony. But in the background, those 4 empty chairs were still visible, and every time I looked at them, the memory stung. My assistant Sarah burst through the door without knocking, something she almost never did. She was slightly out of breath and holding her tablet in the air. "Irma, you need to see this right now," she said. On the screen was a headline appearing across nearly every major business site. My independent hotel chain had been officially valued at more than $120 million. The number itself didn't shock me. I had watched the company grow month by month, seeing the numbers rise slowly but steadily, but seeing the entire world recognize it all at once made the moment feel surreal. Soon my employees began entering the office. They clapped and congratulated me. Some hugged me warmly. Sarah brought out a bottle of sparkling juice she had secretly been saving. "This is for the day you finally accept that you really built this," she said with a grin. I laughed, but the feeling inside me was complicated. Pride and sadness can live in the same heart at the same time, like neighbors who never speak to each other. Part of me wondered if I should call my parents. Then I realized something. They had years to call me first. My phone rang constantly throughout the day. Old classmates, business partners, even a former boss who once told me I was too gentle to lead a company all reached out to congratulate me, but my family remained silent, not a single message. It shouldn't have mattered anymore, but I still found myself waiting for just one text saying, "We're proud of you." By evening, the excitement faded. The office grew quiet again. Sarah gathered her things and left with a cheerful wave, leaving me alone with a stack of new reports. I sat by the window watching the city lights slowly turn on as the sun disappeared behind the buildings. Then my phone buzzed. It was my father. For a moment I froze. There was no apology. No congratulations, just a short message. "Family dinner at 7:00 p.m. Important discussion." It wasn't even phrased like an invitation. It sounded like a command. Sarah noticed my expression while she was putting on her coat. "Let me guess," she said. "They finally contacted you." I showed her the message. She sighed deeply. "They want something," she said flatly. "People don't schedule important discussions because they suddenly love you." I knew she was right. But when I replied with the words, "I'll be there," an unexpected calm settled over me. For the first time in my life, I was walking into their world prepared. I drove home that night with my father's message repeating in my mind. The words felt cold and impersonal, more like instructions sent to an employee than a daughter. Inside my garage, everything felt quiet. My headlights illuminated the shelves where I kept folders from the early days of my business. Those folders held old plans, rejected proposals, and notes from builders who once dismissed me. They reminded me how fiercely I had fought to create something real. I pulled out a folder labeled Early Loans. Inside were numbers, schedules, and records of nights when I barely slept. Looking at those pages, I realized something simple. If I survived those years, I could survive one dinner. Still, one question kept circling in my mind: why now? Just as I closed the garage door, my phone rang. It was Sarah. Her voice sounded tense. "I found something about your father's motels," she said. My stomach tightened immediately. "What about them?" I asked. "They're in serious trouble," she replied. "Bills haven't been paid, workers are complaining. They've been losing money for months, and one of the banks is getting ready to take everything." Suddenly, the timing made perfect sense. Sarah continued, "They don't want a conversation. They want you to fix their mess." A quiet anger settled in my chest. It wasn't loud or explosive. It was calm, sharp, and focused. "What are you thinking?" Sarah asked. "I'm thinking we should move first," I said slowly. She understood instantly. "You want to buy the debt?" she asked. I paused for a moment before answering. "I want the power." By the next morning, Sarah had mapped out every single loan tied to the motel. Some of the debts were small, but others were managed terribly. It became very clear that my father's empire wasn't just falling apart, it was already gone like dust. He just needed someone else to sweep it up for him. And it looked like he expected that person to be me. We spent many hours looking at payments, bills, and contracts. Everything we found showed a sinking ship held together by people who refused to see the truth. Sarah called the lender. The bank was very happy to get rid of a failing account, so they were ready to talk. By late that afternoon, the acquisition was happening. That evening, as I got dressed for the dinner, I felt a change inside me. I did not pick out the soft sweaters I usually wore around my family. Instead, I chose a dark silk blouse and a clean blazer. I pulled my hair back. I didn't look flashy, but I looked like I was in control and capable. On my desk, Sarah put a folder that was neatly prepared. She said, "This is everything you will need. It includes options for changing the business and for ending people's jobs." I looked at her and asked, "Are you sure we are doing the right thing?" She answered me gently, "You are not hurting them. You are just ending the cycle." As I walked out, I knew she was right. This was not about revenge. This was my exit. And the second they asked for help, I would finally show them exactly who they were asking. I arrived with the one thing they never expected: clarity. I didn't bring anger or desperation. I wasn't the old version of myself who tried to earn a spot at their table. I just had the truth and the papers to prove it. The parking lot at the country club was already half full. Warm yellow lights came from the tall windows and hit the manicured hedges. I sat in my SUV for a minute. I breathed in the smell of the leather seats and the light citrus scent of the air freshener. I let myself feel calm. I wasn't there to fight or beg. I was there to finish it. Inside, a hostess said hello with a big smile. But her smile went away as soon as she recognized my family's last name. She whispered, "They are already seated in the back room," as if she were giving me a warning. I said, "Of course." My father always loved having privacy when he was going to corner someone. The second I walked into that private dining room, 4 pairs of eyes locked onto me. My father leaned back in his chair like he owned the whole building. My mother gave me a shaky smile that was supposed to look kind. My older brother had a smirk on his face, like I was late to a meeting that wasn't mine. My younger brother picked up a glass of iced tea to salute me in a lazy way. My uncle, who always showed up when money was mentioned, sat next to my father. He had his hands folded like a consultant who was ready to make a pitch. My father did not even say hello. He just pointed at the empty chair and said, "Sit, we need to talk." I did not move. I said, "Funny, that is exactly what I thought." My mother grabbed her pearls in a dramatic way and said, "Irma, do not start with that tone. This is a family dinner." I finally walked over and put my bag down next to my chair. I sat down and felt very calm. I could feel their expectations in the air like heavy humidity. My father cleared his throat and started, "We are in a situation. The motel, well, they have hit a rough patch. It is nothing we cannot fix with the right infusion of capital." There it was. That was the reason for the text and their sudden interest in me. My older brother joined in and said, "We know your business is doing well. It is probably overvalued, but it is still strong. You could help stabilize things for the family, my father added, for the legacy. My mother touched her eyes with a napkin. She said, "We would not ask if we were not desperate, honey." We were humiliated when we heard about the valuation from strangers. Why did you not tell us? I let that question stay in the air for a moment. Why didn't I tell them? Maybe it was because they had not spoken to me since my wedding day. My younger brother leaned over the table and said, "Look, do not be sensitive about the past. We are here now, right? Let us just fix this together." I opened my bag very slowly. Their eyes watched me like a pack of wolves looking for meat. They thought I was going to pull out a checkbook. They thought I was there to save them. Instead, I put the folder Sarah had made in the middle of the table. I slid it toward my father. He looked confused and asked, "What is this?" I answered. "A reality check and a reminder." He opened the folder and scanned the very first page. All the color drained from his face. My older brother leaned in to see the papers. My younger brother just sat there, frozen. My father's voice got loud as he asked, "What is this supposed to mean?" I answered him very calmly. "You wanted a bailout, but that debt, the money that is drowning your motel, it is not the bank's problem anymore." My older brother flipped through the pages quickly. My uncle swallowed hard and asked, "You bought the debt?" I nodded my head once through a holding subsidiary. It was done legally, cleanly, and quietly. As of this afternoon, every single loan tied to those motel belongs to me. My father slammed the folder shut. "You think this is funny?" he shouted, his finger stabbing the air. "What gives you the right?" "The lenders," I said, cutting him off. They were thrilled to get rid of a business that was failing. They practically rushed to sign the papers. My mother gasped and put her hand over her mouth. "Irma, how could you?" she asked. "How could I what?" I said softly. "Make sure your sinking ship does not take me down with it." My father rose halfway out of his chair. He pointed at me and said, "If you walk out that door without helping us, then you are no daughter of mine." The entire room went dead silent. Even the waiter standing outside the door stopped moving. I stood up too, but I did it slowly and stayed in control. All those years of pain, of them making my success feel like nothing. And all those cheap guilt trips were right there behind me like invisible witnesses. I did not walk away. I said, "You did. You skipped my wedding. You ignored my life. You only appear when you want something." My father's jaw was tight. He said, "We are your family and I am not your rescue plan," I replied. I opened a smaller envelope and put a single check on the table. "This is a buyout. It is for $250,000. It is enough for you to walk away with a clean slate. You have 30 days to vacate the properties. After that, I am restructuring everything." My older brother grabbed the check. "You are kicking us out of our own motel," he said. "They are not yours," I told him. "They haven't been yours for months." The debt swallowed all the value long before I stepped in. My younger brother just shook his head and muttered, "This is insane." My uncle's voice sounded like it was breaking. "You are ending your father's legacy," he said. "No," I said, "I am ending his control." My mother started to cry softly. "We just wanted to talk," she said. You wanted money," I said. "But you never wanted me." The words did not come from a place of anger. They came from a place of clarity. It was so quiet inside me that it almost felt scary. My father's voice cracked for the first time in my life. "Irma, do not do this," he said. I looked at him. I really looked at him. I saw a man who had built a prison out of his own pride. He was a man who thought love was something you could trade like money. He thought I still needed him to tell me it was okay to breathe. "I already did," I said. I gathered my bag and the empty envelope. Sarah stepped into the doorway right on time. She was holding backup copies of every single document. Her being there made the room feel even smaller for them. "If you have any questions," she said to the table, "direct them to our office and please put them in writing." My father sank back into his seat. My older brother whispered a curse word. My younger brother just stared at the table like it had betrayed him. My mother reached out a shaking hand toward me, but I stepped back. "Irma," she whispered. "Please do not leave like this." I met her eyes. "I begged you once," I said, "at my wedding." Then I turned around and walked out. I could hear their voices getting louder behind me. They were shouting and panicking and scraping their chairs on the floor, but none of it touched me. The hallway felt brighter and the air felt cleaner. The weight was finally gone. Outside, the night was cool and the sky looked wide open. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Sarah. "Proud of you." For the first time in years, I actually believed it. I wasn't losing a family that night. I was getting myself back. The next morning, the sunlight moved across my kitchen counter and hit the folder I had thrown there after the club. For the first time in a long time, it didn't look like a burden. It looked like a clean break. It was proof of a boundary I should have made years ago. Sarah called me around 900 a.m. The transition went through. She said, "You officially control every asset tied to the motel. Their access ends today." I breathed out slowly. It wasn't about winning, and I didn't feel regret. It was just a release. Over the next few weeks, the change started. Builders toured the properties. Designers walked through with tablets, taking notes for what would become wellness retreats. They would be calm, intentional spaces, the exact opposite of the mess they used to be. Every time I went to a site, the air felt lighter. It was like the buildings were relieved that someone was finally looking at them with honest eyes. My family did not call me once. I heard rumors about them. My older brother was angry. My father was in denial, and my mother was crying. My younger brother posted some vague quotes online about being betrayed, but he never said my name. For the first time, what they did or said didn't pull me backward. They were just people existing away from me. One afternoon, while I was looking at design boards, I saw my reflection in the window. I had my blazer on, my hair was tied back, and my face looked steady. I was a woman who wasn't hiding her success anymore, just to make other people feel okay. I wasn't mistaking people's control for love anymore. I realized then that I hadn't destroyed anything. I had just stopped playing the game. The motel would open as retreats in the spring. It was a rebirth built on the truth. I finally understood that walking away wasn't abandonment, it was protection. It was protection from them, but also for myself. In the end, it wasn't the $120 million valuation that changed my life. It was the moment I realized I didn't need a family that only remembered me when they needed to be saved. Real love doesn't ask you to stay quiet. Real loyalty doesn't disappear on your biggest day. Walking out of that country club, I didn't lose anything. I reclaimed the part of myself they had taught me to hide. And if you have ever had to walk away from people who called their control care, you know exactly how good that freedom feels. If this story meant something to you, please pass it along to others. Leave a comment with your thoughts and make sure to subscribe so you can see more of our content.